Hey guys, welcome back to Nyx Reads. Today from the bedroom that is slightly cooler than the rest of the house. It's almost 40 degrees Celsius today. There's a heat wave, a heat warning out, so I'm gonna try to keep it brief because I'm sweating just saying the introduction. So my younger sister called me the other day. She's also an avid reader. She started reading a lot a few years ago, and now this is a hobby that we have in common, which is really nice. She's in her mid-20s. She's kind of sick of all the YA books, contemporary YA books that she's been reading, because there's just been too many 3 stars. So she asked me specifically for book recommendations that are not YA, books that are maybe from different kinds of genres. And I thought that this could actually be quite an interesting video, because I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that are reading YA regardless of the age, and maybe you hit some kind of plateau with it, so you want to venture into something a bit different. So I put together this list specifically for my sister actually, and I hope she's gonna find a few in here that she's gonna read. I do have to say though, she does already read non-YA books. So for example, she read more Celestining than I did. So here are my 8 book recommendations for people who kind of want to inch away from young adult in the next time. And I'm also going to tell you why I specifically chose these books. I included one nonfiction in this book. It's The Anthropocene Reviewed by John Green. I read this, I think, last year, and if you've heard of this author before, he's actually very well known for writing pretty successful young adult novels. The Anthropocene Reviewed is his first nonfiction work. He describes it as a collection about the shared human experience. Seemingly extremely random topics. From the top of my head, the ones I remembered are an essay about Dr. Pepper, a comet, a certain type of grass that people in North America use for their lawns. With each of these essays, he demonstrates how even though you've never seen, heard, experienced any of these things in these essays before, you can still relate to some aspect of it because we all have this shared human experience on Earth. I do think that because he usually writes YA, there is a lightness to his tone that keeps the reader super engaged. And if you're a YA reader who usually doesn't really read nonfiction, it's for this reason that I picked this, because I think it'll keep you interested, and I definitely recommend also listening to this. I did not read a physical copy, but listening to this was kind of like listening to a longer Vlogbrothers YouTube video, or also like a podcast. While I obviously cannot remember every single thing that he mentions in this book, there's actually a few facts that I still tell to other people to this day. Very interesting collection of essays, and I specifically chose this for the tone of the nonfiction work. Next, I'm jumping into a book that is very different from nonfiction. It's The 7 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton. I'm pretty sure that in other countries this is called The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. This book is about a party that takes place in a manor where the young and beautiful Evelyn Hardcastle, who is the daughter of the house, gets killed at the end of the party. Our main character Aiden witnesses this. What happens is that he keeps waking up, reliving the same day over and over again, where he has to try to find out who kills Evelyn Hardcastle and how to save her, but with a twist that I don't think I've seen in this kind of trope before, that he wakes up every day but in a different body. So he has to try to break the cycle and identify the killer to save her, and also figure out why this is happening to him and what he has to do with Evelyn. This has the flavor of Downton Abbey meets Groundhog Day. I think that a YA reader will enjoy this because the story is just so gripping, and there's so much to think about, to puzzle about, that this is honestly going to be just 100% entertainment. It is a page turner that'll keep you guessing, and it is the best book that I've read from Stuart Turton so far. You can have your own opinion about the ending, because I think these types of books are very hard to come together. So I think some people will love the ending, some people will be unhappy with it, but either way, the journey is pretty unique. Next, I have another genre-bending work of fiction. It's The Lighthouse Witches by C.J. Cooke. I did not find this book on my own. This was actually one of the books that my boyfriend randomly chose for me last year, and I absolutely enjoyed it. The tagline is 3 daughters, a secluded island, secrets unearthed, and that pretty much sums it up perfectly. So in the 90s, we have Liv, who's a mom to 3 beautiful daughters who chooses to run away from something. She brings them to an island with a mysterious lighthouse, but shortly after, only one of the daughters is left. 20 years later, so there's a time jump in the story, the daughter Luna goes back to the island and tries to figure out what happened to her mom and her sisters. The author was born in Belfast and now lives in Glasgow, and I think that she managed to create such an atmospheric, dark, stormy, cold island read. This book gets pretty dark. There's also some folklore involved in this story. This is a very successful witchy read, and there's twists in here that I don't want to give away because they were completely unexpected to me. I didn't think that the story would take this kind of direction. So it is not just about the family drama. There's a speculative element in here as well. I picked this book because this involves a lot of mystery and family, and I think those are themes that are picked up in YA contemporary novels a lot as well, but this gives it a real witchy and dark twist. Next, I have a book that you could probably classify between new adult and adult, and it has a lot of magical realism in it. It's The Inheritance of Arcadia Divina by Zoraida Cordova. This is the first book I read by this author, and I enjoyed it a lot. Orquidea is the matriarch of the family Montoya. There's a lot of secrecy in the family history, but she doesn't really tell any of her kids or grandkids what exactly happened in the past. When she's about to die, the family comes home, the home that she never really left, to collect their inheritance. But instead, she turns into a tree in front of everybody's eyes, and she leaves her family members with very odd blessings and gifts. Like in the book before, in this one you also travel back and forth in time to learn what happened to Orquidea when she was younger and how she came to have these blessings for her family to live such a fulfilled life. What is it that she did in the past? There's some serious family secrets to be discovered in this novel. The reason why I picked this book is, once again, there's a lot of very interesting family dynamics in this book and family secrets that need to be unearthed, which happens a lot in YA books as well. Then there's also interesting romantic relationships in this book, with the difference that all of this is sprinkled with a bit of magic. Staying within the magical theme, the next book you've probably heard of, it's The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. This book is about Linus, who is a caseworker for the department in charge of magical youth. His job is quite boring, but then he gets a very interesting assignment where he has to travel to an island orphanage with 6 magical children. His job is to assess whether this orphanage needs to be closed or not. So Linus, who lives a pretty ordinary life, who doesn't have a lot going on for himself, he's pretty much very solitary, doesn't have romance in his life. He goes to this island and his world is changed. If there's one word to describe this book, it's wholesome. The children are extremely interesting because some of them are slimy creatures, one of them is a gnome, and one of them is Satan's child itself. Linus learns very fast that while these kids are very, very different from humans, their wants and needs and how they should be treated is not that different. This really does have the trope of grumpy man goes into a new situation with new people and suddenly he learns what love is and his heart starts to open up for other people. I chose this book because the language is very whimsical and playful and very easy to read, but it is very emotional and packed with very important messages. Moving on to a book that is a bit heavier, but I think a very, very important read. It's Kazuo Ishiguro's Never Let Me Go. I featured this in 2 vlogs, I think last December, so if you want to hear more of my thoughts, you can, I'm gonna link them below and you can watch them if you want. I chose this book because I did not feature any kind of other classic on here. This is what I would probably describe as a modern classic. If you're reading YA, you might not feel in the mood to read a Jane Austen or George Orwell because maybe that is something you just recently or are reading in school. I mean, classics can be pretty heavy, whereas this book is from the early 2000s, and reading this will still give you, I think, a huge sense of accomplishment because this is from a Nobel Prize-winning author. He won the Nobel Prize for Literature, and truthfully, this is just so good. This book is about the children Kathy, Ruth, and Tommy, and they all go to a very mysterious, very special boarding school. None of them really know why they're there and don't know what they're being prepared for in life. You as the reader don't know either, and bit by bit you discover what really is going on in that boarding school. What makes these kids so special and very different. This is incredibly emotional. This really is a slow burn novel, but it is 100% worth it. It is very atmospheric because it does take place in the English countryside. Ultimately, this book is so messed up. This is a must read for absolutely anybody, and I think you can definitely read this when you come off YA. Next, I have a translated work of fiction from Swedish author Fredrik Backman. It's Anxious People. The premise of this is super interesting. So we have an apartment viewing where there's random people from different walks of life viewing the apartment with a real estate agent, and next door there's a bank robbery that goes wrong. So the bank robber, because they run out of option, goes into that apartment and ends up taking everybody hostage. So the police is stationed outside of the apartment trying to get the robber to come out. While all of that chaos is happening, you as the reader get to know each of these hostages and the robber's backstory. I think this is a great contemporary fiction novel for the YA reader out there, because you go through all of these people's backstories, and no matter how young or old you are, you will find something to relate to. It is well written, and this really calls to your empathy. And my very last recommendation is the only thriller in this list. If you're my age or older, chances are you've read this book, but I think if you've been reading YA lately, you might have not yet, although this is super popular. It's Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. This book is so twisty and unhinged and just completely nuts, but so well written. The premise is very simple. We have married couple Amy and Nick Dunn, and on the morning of their 5th wedding anniversary, the wife Amy just disappeared. And from there on out, everybody else is trying to figure out what happened to Amy, and does her husband Nick have anything to do with it. I think this is a complete must read, because this will keep you on the edge of your seat, and also this book is probably one of the books that changed the landscape of thrillers a lot, because after this came out, there was suddenly so many other books that followed the premise of wife disappearing or girl disappearing. Even the titles of so many thrillers started to change, because suddenly the word girl or woman was featured in a lot of them that came after this book. And then there's also the phenomenon of male thriller authors using a pen name that resembles a female author's name, because that'll apparently help their sales. So what I'm trying to say is that this book changed the landscape for domestic thrillers, and it is just so good. The movie is also fantastic, and even if you do know the outcome, because at this point you've probably been spoiled for this before, it is still worth the read. It is mind-blowingly good. It is just a bunch of people doing absolutely horrible things to each other. I picked it for this list because it is so deliciously evil, and if you usually don't really read thrillers, I think this is honestly a good one. I don't want to give you a 3-star thriller to start. I want you to start on a bang. On a side note, does anybody know when Gillian Flynn is bringing out a new book? Because I know that there's so many of us waiting for a new release. I think there was some kind of Gillian Flynn cruise that was going on last year. I'm still waiting for a new book. That was all of my recommendations specifically to my sister, but I hope this applies to anybody who's trying to find something else than YA contemporary. Let me know if any of these make it onto your TBR. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.